All right, folks. I got a great guest for you today, Jackson Lahmeyer, who is in charge of the Faith Council. I didn't even know President Trump had something like this, but it's a very this is going to be a real impactful podcast. I can't wait to get him on. He's going to take questions from my audience, so get your questions ready. Put them in the super chat if that's the way you want to do it. We'll do a good question and answer here. He's going to talk about what is really going on. Faith under fire, folks. Why the DOJ, FBI, and IRS are being investigated for systematic bias against Christians and what the White House Faith Council is doing about it. He's been appointed by Trump. At his church, Donald Trump, Eric Trump go and speak there. So ask away your questions. This is going to be a phenomenal podcast. All right, folks, and not often do I come on twice a day, especially on my morning show days on a Friday, but I had to bring him on live. I was gonna do it pre-recorded, but I thought, I'll bring this guy on so he can take questions from the audience. I think it should be harmless, right? Right? We're also going to talk about the Muslim takeover, what's happening in Dearborn, Michigan, what's happening in Plano. Not in great detail because this is fluff tube, but we'll touch on it a little bit and why Christians are being persecuted. All right, folks, a recent study found nearly half of patients following popular weight loss trends quit within a year, often used lower than prescribed doses, and ultimately lost less weight than they were led to believe. This is why I use the secret amazing new product, and I'm obsessed with the results, folks. It is designed to naturally support my body's own GLP-1 production and boost levels by over 50% without drugs, prescriptions, or needles. It promotes safety and feelings of fullness, reduces cravings, reduces my hunger hormones, helps me lose fat instead of muscle, and that's a good thing, and supports healthy blood sugar levels. Summer is here. It's time to get the beach body you want. It's a little late for that, but you should always want a beach body. Grab yourself a bottle of GLP-1 now to save up 44% at Trim with Nino, trimwithnino.com. Plus, you'll also get two free ebooks titled The 3-Week Diet and 53 Fat-Burning Smoothies and Milkshakes. Once again, this offer is only available at trimwithnino.com. Folks, this is going to be a great podcast. Let's bring Jackson on right now. Jackson.
Hey, how's it going, man?
I like that jersey in the back there. Who is that?
Kobe Bryant. He's my guy. Bryant.
Yeah, he is. Man, so much going on with Trump right now. So many big changes. I think we all knew that there was something going on in the background. I do feel a lot of Christians were targeted, but they were saying, it's the right. People on the right, people that support Trump. But you're here to say that you are actually part of a faith council that's investigating this?
Yeah, so a little backstory. In the 24 campaign, I was asked to lead Pastors for Trump, which was the coalition of pastors mobilizing, evangelicals to turn out to vote. And so President Trump made a campaign promise that if he was elected, he would start a White House faith office. Now, there's never been one before. Other administrations, they've had initiatives, but he promised to start a faith office. And, the thing I love about President Trump is he's not one of the guys on the campaign trail that just makes promises and then doesn't follow through. He made a promise, he followed through, and he launched the White House faith office. And so that is being led by Pastor Paula White and Jenny Korn, who are actually there. And they're doing an amazing job, and I get to work with them in this. And so here's what I can tell you. There is a systemic bias within the federal government against people of faith, specifically Christians. And a lot of this began under Barack, which, we already knew that, but now we have evidence for that.
It didn't start. It started under.
Not as far. Listen, there was bias, but there was not a systemic targeting of Christians like there was under using the weight of the federal government. I'm speaking about the DOJ, FBI, ATF, but especially the IRS. That's the big one. The IRS going after Christians, auditing pastors for no reason whatsoever other than that they were pastors who happened to maybe support Donald Trump. And so the cases have piled up. And President Trump launched the Anti-Christian Bias Task Force. This is how important This is to our president because religious liberty, you know this, your audience knows this, is foundational to the American experiment just as much as freedom of speech, the right to bear arms. And so we're uncovering a lot. It's all also on the White House's website, but the media will not tell you this. The media won't even tell you there is a faith office. And this is incredible to me because being a pastor, being a Christian, you know, my church got reported to the IRS like over 2,000 times because I was leading Pastors for Trump. And, you know, you don't want to be reported to the IRS once, let alone, you know, several thousand times. And so this is what's happening. And a lot of people, unfortunately, just don't know about it.
You know, I've often wondered, you know, well, like what Biden hired 86,000 new IRS agents that were what they were targeting, allegedly targeting Christians, right? Mainly.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. Grand Canyon University, it's a Christian university under Biden's administration, received the largest fine ever in U.S. history. Now, President Trump, he undid that fine because they were targeted being a Christian university. Liberty University, the exact same story. Their fine wasn't as large, but it was very significant, and President Trump undid that as well. So, yes, as much as people want to say, no, Christians weren't being targeted, yes, they were. The evidence is on the White House's website alone. You can see cases upon cases. This anti-Christian bias task force is going to be unveiling a whole lot of stuff and then coming up with solutions. How do we make sure that this never happens again? Because think about it. A nation that was founded on religious liberty by primarily Christians has been weaponized to target Christians. I mean, the irony is incredible. Thankfully, though, Donald Trump is in the driver's seat, and this is a very important issue to him, and we're getting things done about it.
You know, in no way I often think about like what happened in Waco, Texas, right? Way back, I think it was the 90s with David Koresh.
Yeah.
And I remember that raised a red flag to me. And I was like, wait a minute here. I had a feeling that that was going to be used as like a catapult, as a springboard to go. And I'm not saying there's any correlation. I know it was a fanatical, crazy, combine, whatever it was, right? Cult. But I had a feeling they were going to kind of use that to categorize or lump all or cast a big net after Christians. I felt like that was going to be the beginning of it. And I think I was right. I think that's what they were going to start doing with that.
They used a particular term, and this is how they were able to have a legal way to target Christians. And the term was Christian nationalism. You remember that? That was a big deal.
But did that start with Koresh?
I don't know if it started with Koresh, but it really became popularized during the first administration of President Trump because it was Christians that got him in to the White House because there was this major support for Donald Trump among the Christian community. And so ever since, say, 2020, there was this major push to label Christians who were politically engaged as Christian nationalists. And now, listen, those two words together, I like. I'm a Christian, and politically, I'm America first. I'm a nationalist. But that's not what they meant by it. They meant that I was a threat to democracy, a potential domestic terrorist. Remember how the FBI was going after parents at school board meetings and all that type of stuff?
Unbelievable, bro. I can't believe they were going to make
unbelievable.
Christians the terrorists.
Yes, Christian nationalism is a threat to democracy according to the Biden administration, and that is where the targeting came from.
Because if there's any group that can get in the way of the liberal agenda, it would be Christians or the nuclear family, correct?
Yes. Yeah, well, think about it. 9 out of 10 evangelicals in 2024 voted for Donald Trump. I mean, you're talking 90%. And the largest voting bloc in America is evangelical Christians. They just don't turn out to vote. But if evangelicals were mobilized and they actually voted, it's game over in this country. It's game over. And that was our job in 2024, was to mobilize through Pastors for Trump, the largest voting bloc in America. That's why they came after us so hard. It was, we don't want Christians to vote their values, because if they do, there's no way they can vote for Kamala Harris. You can't do it as a Christian. You cannot vote for a Democrat because the values, they just don't align, and they know that. And so a great threat to their takeover was ordinary Christians turning out to vote.
You know, another thing I noticed, especially 2020 in that time frame of the Biden administration, I noticed it seemed like a lot of the churches became captured operations. And I don't know if they still are, but it seemed like the government was running them. Like you would see, and I got to be kind of vague here on YouTube, but they were promoting this at churches.
Oh yeah,
they were also the colored flags. You know, I was like, that's not the church I was raised in. They're endorsing all this stuff. They were endorsing that agenda. Has that all been reversed now? Do you know?
Well, those churches, many of them are still not here today. They went so far. It's just like those companies, right? Those companies that went so far into wokeism and to the left, they got hurt financially, and so did those churches. Because to your point, that's not a church, and people left.
They're pushing an agenda.
Yeah, they pushed it. They pushed a political agenda that was anti-biblical. It's very hard to be a church and push an agenda that doesn't align with the Bible, right? It's kind of the core tenet of who we are. It was unfortunate, though, because to your point, so many churches, they shut down. They promoted things that they should have never have promoted, and they've paid for it in the long run. But other churches exploded during that time. Mine's one of the churches that did. We stayed open. And I learned something. If you're the only store open, people tend to shop at your business. And so as a church, we were open, and people came because their church closed down.
Now you've had Don Jr. and Eric speak at your church. What are those guys like? I met Don once, and I loved the guy. He was very charismatic, funny guy, positive energy. I met him here at We Build the Wall. What are those guys like? What are the Trump brothers like? And most importantly, what is Donald? How is Donald Trump? Is he a man of faith? I mean, because people ask that question. You know, we all know what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. I call it the God tilt. A lot of people call it the God tilt. But what are these men like? What is Donald Trump like? How strong is he in faith and his son?
With Don and Eric, they've been to my church. They come and speak at my church. We do great events. We've had Don here, Eric and Laura here, Kash Patel, Mayor Giuliani. So we've had a lot of these guys come through, and we've had absolute blast. And those two guys, the two brothers, are extremely normal, okay? They're so normal, it's hard to believe they come from a billionaire lifestyle in New York City. They like to hunt. They like to fish. I mean, just things that us Oklahomans, we just do on a regular basis. And so, you know, having them has been great. Don's very charismatic. Eric is very intellectual. And so that's kind of their difference there. But in regards to President Trump, yeah, I can tell you a particular story. It was Easter this year. And if you remember Easter 2024, Joe Biden declared Disability Day, slapping every Christian in the face.
Well, every Christian in the face.
Oh, every Christian in the face. And this year, though, President Trump was like, we're not just going to celebrate Easter Sunday. We're going to celebrate Holy Week, an entire week at the White House celebrating the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And so he has a few of us pastors up for dinner, and he gets up to speak. Now, you got to realize these are all pastors. It's like Franklin Graham, Jensen Franklin, myself. And President Trump gets up and he preaches a flawless Resurrection Sunday sermon to a
Trump preached it?
Trump did. He's up there preaching the gospel to us pastors. It was like, okay.
Are you serious?
I'm being dead serious. Dead serious.
Wow.
And that night, the president spent about 5 hours with us pastors, 5 hours in the White House, giving us a tour of the residence, just the whole stuff. And so he loves pastors. In fact, he has pastors come into his office to pray for him. And that's not because he needs us any longer to mobilize our base to vote for him. He's already in office. There's no political gain for hanging out with pastors. There's no gain politically other than he wants prayer because, to his point, he said it. We don't just want God in America. We need God in America. That's his words.
So I've often wondered, you know, of Donald Trump's faith. I know he's a good man. You know, I voted for him, obviously. Has he ever proclaimed Jesus Christ as his savior in public? Because I don't know if he has. I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Oh, yeah. He did that night with us pastors. He was very, very clear whenever he would use the term God. You know, a lot of people use God as a generic, you know, whoever your God is, your God. Right. No, President Trump was very clear that Jesus Christ is Lord. And he talked about the death, the burial, and the resurrection, and how we are saved by the blood of Jesus Christ. That was out of his mouth to us pastors, and it came from his heart. You could tell. You could tell. And that day in Butler, Pennsylvania, it changed his life.
I was
It
just
really
gonna ask
did.
that. I was just going to ask that next. Do you think that what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, strengthened his faith? Because it seemed to me that he got more solidified in his faith after that event.
Well, he tasted death and he was spared. And so I'll tell you, in the Oval Office, when you go in there, there's kind of like two ways into the Oval. And above both doors, President Trump has placed two angels. Now, they're gold angels because everything on the Oval right now is gold. He likes gold. But there's two angels. And he'll tell you the reason he put those angels above those doors in the Oval is because he knows without a shadow of a doubt that day, Butler, Pennsylvania, there was an angel there with him. God spared his life. And this is his words. God spared his life to help save the United States of America. So he feels like he's a man on a divine mission, which is why, you're a former athlete. He's playing loose. They always say, an athlete that's tight, he's not playing to his potential. President Trump, if you watch him in the Oval, he's loose. He's so loose. It's because he really believes he's on a divine mission.
I believe it. I think we all do. So when you meet with Trump, what's it like advising the Trump administration? I mean, on matters of faith. But when I say that, does he attend church every Sunday? Is he going to church, or is it just an occasional thing? I mean, I know he's very busy.
He can't go to church every Sunday because whatever church he went to every Sunday, it'd be a madhouse. So it's just an unreasonable thing to think.
But do you all go there and preach the gospel?
Oh, yeah.
How does this work?
A lot of people don't realize there's church services happening at the White House, that there are church services being led by pastors coming up. There's praise or worship. Listen to this. A lot of people don't know this. In the first 6 months of this administration, over 2,000 pastors have been brought up to the White House. I want you to think about that. 2,000 pastors brought up to the White House to pray, to worship, and to saturate the place in the presence of God. That's at the directive of the president. He wants pastors there praying, worshiping, because he understands we've got to have God's blessing in this nation if we're going to save America.
But does he bring any other religious leaders up to do anything? Is it just strictly Christians? You get what I'm saying here? Like, is he leveling the playing field and bringing them all up to pray?
Well, you have to realize,
I see him in Israel and he's there with a yarmulke on his head and he's at the Wailing Wall. I mean, to be fair here, is he doing it with everybody or just Christians?
Well, so the vast majority is Christians, the vast majority. However, like on the National Day of Prayer, that is an interfaith event that is across the board in regards to you're going to have Jewish rabbis, Muslim imams, and so forth. It's an interfaith event, and that's just something because religious liberty is extended not just to Christians. Religious liberty is extended to everybody in this country. But in regards to who makes up the vast majority of the religious leaders that are at the White House, it's by far evangelical Christians. And Pastor Paula White, who is the senior advisor to the president on this matter, she's an evangelical Christian. And so, yes, there is representation of other faiths. However, the vast majority is Christian, and the president, he's a Christian.
How have you seen this turn around now? So we were all, I know Christians were very worried during the Biden administration. Everyone knew they were being targeted. They were saying the Christian right, far right, they were lumping this all together. 6 happened, which, what's very questionable about that, what happened there, but I won't go into that here. But everything that transpired during the Biden administration, everyone saw the writing on the wall. How are you seeing this reverse now?
Well, it starts with the head. It starts with the president. He has been the one to make sure that there's an anti-Christian bias task force. The sole job of that task force is to look into all the different federal agencies.
Hold on, an actual task force.
There's
an actual Christian task force.
There is a anti-Christian bias task force. The chairman of it is the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick. Their sole purpose is to unravel anti-Christian bias within the federal government and then expose it and get rid of it. That's the sole purpose.
This was an actual agenda. This was real.
Yes.
This was not conspiracy. This was actually happening, an anti-Christian agenda. Targeting
Absolutely.
Christians.
Absolutely. And so the president has made it a matter of priority This is not something he did, in the first year, first 6 months. This was within the first 100 days of his presidency, because it's such a real thing. And he made that promise to pastors on the campaign trail. And he's a man of his word. Say whatever you want about Donald Trump, but when Donald Trump says he's going to do something, he does it.
Yeah, there it says anti-Christian task force. Wow. So how was the IRS going to be targeting Christians? I mean, what did that entail? Like, how did that, the FBI, the DOJ, FBI, IRS, so they were all going to be like this huge conglomerate going after Christians? What did that entail? Like, how were they going to start targeting Christians?
Twofold.
Okay.
We'll break down the IRS real quickly.
Okay.
So, the Johnson Amendment is something that has always been used against churches and pastors, that if a pastor gets too political, they could lose their tax-exempt status. And so the Johnson Amendment was never utilized, but it was always a threat. If you were a black church that was bringing in a Democrat to speak at your church, you would get a federal grant. But if you were a conservative church and you were bringing in, say, a Republican to speak, well, you could lose your tax. It was a two-tiered type of thing. And the Johnson Amendment, look it up. Lyndon Johnson, he hated pastors because when he was a senator in Texas, there was a pastor from Houston who would preach sermons against Lyndon Johnson because he was a terrible human being. And so Johnson hated this pastor so much, he forced through what's called the Johnson Amendment, which states that a 501c3 tax-exempt organization could lose their tax-exempt status if they engaged in political activity. Well, what does that do? That shuts up churches and pastors because we can't lose our tax-exempt status.
But that's been reversed.
The IRS, thanks to the White House Faith Office, the IRS came out, I think it was about a month and a half ago, and the IRS said pastors and churches can endorse political candidates from behind the pulpit. The New York Times, to my shock, was the one who broke the story. The IRS caved on that issue. And thankfully, now you can go to pastors and say, you guys don't have to worry about the IRS taking your tax-exempt status. They have literally said themselves, you can get involved politically. You can be engaged in the affairs that are happening in this country. But it was always a scare tactic. It was always, if you do this, you could lose your tax-exempt status. So many pastors, what did they do? They just stayed silent. They wouldn't speak about these things. But like I said, black churches that had Democratic speakers in, they wouldn't be targeted. They'd be rewarded. And so
how long was this going on for? So
the Johnson Amendment,
Johnson, right?
Yeah, the Lyndon Johnson. This is back in the 60s,
and it intensified.
Yep, and always was used as a scare tactic to shut up Christians, because who is in this country the greatest threat to the globalist agenda? Well, it's Christians. It's Christians. Who's going to push back against some of these just highly immoral things, like you name it? It's going to be Christians because of the value system that Christians have. And so what was the target? What was the aim? Let's shut them up, and let's start with the pulpits.
Right. And people got to realize as well, this has been an agenda for a very long time, and they worked very hard at this for decades by destroying the nuclear family, taking the father out of the household, endorsing things like Planned Parenthood. I mean, this has been, and it started really with the Democratic Party, correct?
Yeah. So you trace a lot of this all the way back to the 50s and the 60s. And Lyndon Johnson was a major contributor to all of this. Like I said, not a good human being, a very wicked man. And he caused a lot of damage socially and then obviously politically that we're still dealing with today. But thankfully, the IRS caved. The IRS caved and said, all right, you pastors, you were right. Because, we were preaching it. I was saying it. No, we pastors, just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean I lose my right to be engaged politically. I don't lose my right because I'm a pastor. And yet that was the narrative from the Democratic Party.
So are you one of the head advisors to Trump under the Faith Council?
Yeah, so I'm involved with the National Faith Advisory Board. I'm on that board. I work with the White House Faith Office. And then obviously I led Pastors for Trump. So highly involved and engaged. I am not a government employee by any stretch of the means. Neither do I want to be a government employee. I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
So where are we at? Where do we stand right now? Like with what you see, everything transpiring? Obviously, like I've said, Obama brought in millions upon millions of Muslims. It almost seemed like they were trying to create that kind of civil unrest or civil fire, that civil type of war with Christians and Muslims and other faiths. And they brought in millions of these people, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do we remedy something like that? Like we can't just throw them out of the country. Like, how do we neutralize this threat, and what are Christians doing about it? How do you get what I'm saying here? It seems like it's a very fine balance.
Well, I think we have to first come to terms with the greatest threat to the West is Islam. It's the greatest threat that we face because Islam is not. You see those coexist bumper stickers that have all the different religions. Yeah. There's only one religion on there that has no intention of coexisting with anybody else. That's Islam.
Right. And it goes against the Constitution and everything and Sharia law. And, and I don't want to get too far into it because it is YouTube. But I mean, how are we combating this?
Well, I think it's important, one, to recognize that President Trump realizes that. I mean, you can just see in what he has done and in his actions, he realizes that. Now, religious liberty does grant the freedom of religion to Muslims to practice their faith here in the United States of America. They have that right, just like I have the right and you have the right and everybody else does. So you do have to separate the individual Muslim, say, from the radical Islamist movement. I mean, you do have to separate those two things. But here's my message. It's very simple. If Christians engage, our nation's going to be just fine. If Christians do not engage, it's over. Christians are to be the salt and the light of the earth, meaning salt preserves something that is decaying. Our culture is decaying. We're salt. We're to preserve it. We are light. It's very dark out there. Light invades darkness. So if Christians engage, America will be saved. If Christians do not, America will go down in the ash heap of history. That's really, in my opinion, how this breaks down. And so in order for America to be saved, here's the key. Americans must first get saved. We need Americans coming to know Jesus Christ. If you do not have a change of the heart in the American people, the results are going to be disastrous. And so the gospel has to go forward. So it's not a policy. It's not a political movement. The answer to America's issues is the gospel. And the answer, you know, this is cliche, Jesus is the answer for the United States of America.
You know, a lot of people will say Generation Z, Generation Alpha coming up, they're lost generations. I mean, the odds are stacked against them. And then I've heard that argument. And then I've also heard an argument that there's actually a lot of kids now that are coming up that are actually turning to conservative values. Yeah. Are we seeing that grow, or have you seen it? I mean, especially after Trump, did it grow, or is it stunted? Or are they just complete misfits? I mean, I would think that most kids, from what I see when Charlie Kirk goes to a campus, they all seem like they're liberal, man. Like they go to these what I call indoctrination camps and get liberalized, you know, instead of getting baptized, they're getting liberalized.
And well, let me give you some good news. So here's just some recent numbers. This Easter was the highest attended Easter Sunday in America over the last 25 years. So church attendance spiked this particular Easter. Young men, and this is the amazing stat, young men are outpacing young women to church, which is so backwards because it's always the girl. Before. Yeah, it's always the girl that drags the guy, right? The girl drags the guy to church. This something different is happening. Young men are outpacing young women. And here's the stat that tells me we might be, in fact, I would say we are in the midst of a spiritual awakening. Bible sales among first-time Bible buyers is at an all-time high. So what that means is not people who already own a Bible are going and buying Bibles. People who have never owned a Bible are going and buying Bibles, and it's at a record high right now. So there is movement. We're seeing things, because you remember how bad the numbers were. We were fading so quickly. But this year, the numbers are incredible. And I think a lot of it does have to do whenever you have a president of the United States telling you should go buy a Bible. I mean, that makes an impact on his followers.
I don't think it's just that. I think it has to do with what we've been watching in Hollywood, what's happening in the music industry. People can see evil right in front of their face. Don't you agree with that? I mean, everything that's coming out on these celebrities, Epstein Island, the whole thing, man. I mean, it's out there front and center. evil is in your face. And I think it's almost scaring people away from it. They're like, whoa, man, we didn't know this was actually real.
I think they've been lied to so much. You know, I think there's been so many lies thrown at us that people are looking for truth, and they're turning to that old book called the Bible. They're looking for truth because, I mean, it's hard. It's like, what is true? What is not true? What is, you know, there's so many voices out there, right? And the mainstream media has lost like all credibility. And so there is this search for truth. And so people are buying Bibles, which is, you know, to me, I absolutely love it.
So let's, you know, I keep saying that, you know, for me, and I'm just going to speak on my faith. I started off Catholic, right? I was an altar boy. I did all that stuff. And then I kind of left, I left religion, and I kind of went on my own journey, and I did psychedelics. I did the whole thing. But I got to tell you, now that I'm getting older, as I've gotten older, I did a complete circle right back to the Bible. Like, I realized more than ever, this stuff is real.
Yeah.
And this is literal. The spiritual war is absolutely literal, and we are in it now. People call it a culture war. I call it a spiritual war. Yeah. For sure, it's happening. So I've often said that the deep state, you know, they try these panic moves, these desperate moves to distract and to turn the apple cart over. Whatever Trump's agenda is, they're trying their hardest not to go to jail. Their fates are sealed. They know what's coming. So I've often talked about the coming alien card, and how hard and how much and how real it's going to be to people. It's going to be right in our face. I believe this is how they usher in the Antichrist. I believe this is how this all starts. Can you speak on that a little bit, and how we cannot be misled or distracted? Because a lot of people, especially New Agers, are going to be falling into this and you know, accepting the lowercase g, the lowercase gods, as, oh, they seeded the planet. That's why I think the whole ancient aliens things, they aired that for a couple decades or a decade, whatever it was. But I do believe that this is a real thing. They're getting ready to play this alien card. How would you suggest my audience handle this? Do not be deceived, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the alien card is a for sure thing, because they've sown the seeds, right?
Right.
They've sown the seeds to kind of prepare us for, say, that moment, whenever that moment is, and however it comes about. And so, and that's coming from the government, that's coming from Hollywood, that's coming from the media. The seeds have been sown to cause enough like curiosity. Oh, there's probably aliens, and then at some point, you know, it gets revealed, or whatever the case may be. And maybe there really are. You know, the Bible speaks of all kinds of creatures that are out there. Maybe there are. Maybe I've never met one, and I have no idea, but it wouldn't shock me if there are or they're not. However, Christians have to be very, very cautious, because at the end, the Bible does tell us there's going to be a great deception. There's going to be a deception so great that even the very elect, if God didn't end it, would be deceived by it. And so we've got to be able to guard our hearts, guard our minds, and guard our eyes and our ears. And the way that you avoid deception is you have to know the truth so well that anything other than the truth you pick up very quickly. And the truth is God's word. And so I would just encourage everyone who is listening and watching, know your Bibles. Get in the Bible. When you get in the Bible, you'll know the truth, and then we're given a promise. The truth will set you free, free of deception, free of anxiety, whatever it may be. And I know a lot of people struggle with reading the Bible, and they feel like they're letting God down. You know, it's like, I should read my Bible, but I struggle reading the Bible. Well, I just want to encourage you, if you struggle reading the Bible, why don't you stop reading the Bible and begin listening to the Bible? I'll tell you, it'll change your life. And here's what's interesting. The vast majority of Christians throughout all of history, they never read their own personal Bible because they didn't have one. What they did do was they listened to the Bible. In fact, the Bible tells me faith comes by hearing, and hearing God's word, not by reading it.
So you're saying like get the audio version or what?
Oh yeah. If you struggle reading the Bible, there's so many apps out there. Listen to the Bible, and you'll get so much out of it. And because there's some people, you know this, they just don't like to read, and they're trying to force themselves to read the Bible, and they feel like they're disappointing God. They're getting frustrated with themselves. Listen to it. Listen to it at night. Listen to it while you're driving in the car. The audio Bible, I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So you've got access. And if you'll know the truth, I promise you, you won't fall for deception.
Let's try to take some questions from the audience. I mean, I know there has to be some super chat, but if there's not, we'll just take regular questions. You got any questions, Alex?
People are a little bit shy. We've got a couple super chats, but go ahead and ask your questions in the chat. Anyone, we'll pull them up on the screen.
Yeah, if you got a question for Jackson, go right ahead, or for me, doesn't matter. I know this was a last second kind of broadcast. I don't usually do lives twice in a day after I do a morning show, but we're doing it anyway. But if you have a question, and show his book, Alex, as well. There it is. Right.
Chasing After the Wind.
Chasing After the Wind. And what is this about, Pastor?
Well, it's about what all of us are doing. We spend our entire lives chasing the wind, and we never actually catch it. You say, what is the wind? It's happiness. Why do we do what we do? Well, I do what I do because I want to be happy. And sometimes I will do things I know I shouldn't do to try to make myself happy. And so how do you find true happiness, contentment, peace, and joy? And that's what the book is all about, how to actually catch the wind, not spend your entire life chasing it.
You know what's wrong with society today? Nobody's chasing God. They're chasing money. They're chasing clout. They're chasing likes on Instagram. They're chasing fame. Nobody's chasing God, right?
Right. And that's why nobody's happy.
Exactly. 100%.
Nobody's happy.
And it wasn't until I had that traumatic crash and burn in my life that I accepted God more so and changed my life. I've been sober now 5 years, 8 months.
Congratulations.
Yeah, man, and God got more and more real in my life because I gave up something to God. I had to trust God. I said, you know what? I cannot no longer do this anymore. I cannot drink anymore. I'm going to take the leap of faith, and then that shall appear. And I said, I'm giving it to Christ. I just got baptized in December.
Really? Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I don't really put it out there too much, but I did. And I just feel like my faith is growing. You know, I used to look into a lot of other things for answers, like psychedelics or shamans or this or that, whatever, reading this, reading that. But I've only gotten the peace in my heart and in my soul from the Bible and from Jesus Christ. And I will attest to that. And that's a true testimony. Looks like we have a couple questions coming in.
All right.
So what Bible does Jackson recommend? Thank you, Katie's 1409.
That's a great question. So listen, any Bible, just read a Bible, but I'll give you some good options. So the NIV is translated at an 8th grade reading level, which means anybody's going to be able to. It's not the King James, the thous, and all that old English. So the NIV is at an 8th grade reading level. Now, anytime you translate something down, you can lose a little bit of the meaning. So it's a good translation. It's a great starter Bible is the NIV. If you're wanting something a little bit higher that is very literal to the Hebrew and to the Greek, the NRSV, it's translated at like a college reading level. So it's a little tougher to read, but it's more exact. And so anything in between is also going to be good. I preach out of the NIV because I want to make sure everyone in the audience understands what I'm reading. But I read the ESV and the NRSV, and you can't go wrong with the King James or the New King James.
Okay, because I've always heard the NIV was like
a not inspired version,
right? Yeah, exactly. Like that's like the bad version. That's a compromised version. No,
no. Listen, you're going to lose some stuff anytime you translate down to an 8th grade reading level. You're going to lose some of the value. You're going to lose some things. I'm not denying that. However, it's a proper translation. It's done by some of the best people out there. And so it's just fine. Now, some people don't like it, and that's fine. That's fine. Just read a Bible. We can get so caught up in this version that just read a Bible. Read a Bible. It'll do you well.
Jackson, were you born Christian? Were you raised in a Christian household?
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian home, kind of like you. I strayed away, but I was a boomerang. And right. I came back, and now I pastor a great church.
What made you come back? Was it trials and tribulations?
Yeah, I hit rock bottom at 17 years of age. I found out I was going to be a dad in high school. Totally just crushed my world. I didn't know what my plan was to play college basketball. Then I find out I'm going to be a dad as a junior. And it was through that process. I was like a boomerang. I came right back.
Incredible. All right, let's get another question in here. All right. Eric's 9461, the Bible in a year on YouTube or Spotify. Wait, the Bible in a year on YouTube or Spotify by Father Mike Schmidt really helped me understand the Bible. It's 20 minutes a day and he explains passages. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Charity Shalom. Trump recently said he wants to get to heaven and he made it sound like it was based on works. Can you clarify on this? Because the gospel says different.
He was joking. It was a joke. He said, I hear I'm not doing very well in regards to getting to heaven. He said, well, maybe if I end this war, that'll help me get. He was President Trump is very funny. Okay. He jokes nonstop. He understands. Trust me. He understands there is nothing that we can do. He could end every war that there is and still miss heaven. There's only one way to heaven. That is through Jesus Christ. He knows that. He has confessed Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. That was him joking around. That's his personality. And then people just took it. You know how they do. They take things out of context.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Before Jesus Christ, was everyone, and I'm really, this is a serious question. So I was knifed in the throat. I almost died. I got 369 stitches. I also overdosed on drugs in 2011, both in the same year. And so, you know, I just saw blackness like I didn't exist. And that scared me. I mean, what does that mean? I guess what I'm trying to say here is I didn't experience hell. I didn't experience heaven. I just experienced nothing.
Yeah, I can't speak to your specific experience of what you went through. However, what I would say is that was probably maybe God using that opportunity to speak to you, maybe to get your attention of, I'm assuming the blackness and the nothingness wasn't enjoyable, wasn't something you desired.
It was just like being under anesthesia. I know I went into cardiac arrest and things like that when I overdosed on drugs. I don't know if I crossed over when I got knifed in the throat. I think I just lost a lot of blood and I was unconscious. So yeah. I'm thinking maybe I didn't cross over.
Yeah. Maybe an out of body experience. You know, there's a lot of those type of things.
Right. But before Jesus Christ, were people just like, were they going to hell? What was it? Was it a soul death?
That's a great question. Can I take like 2 minutes to answer that?
Yes.
All right. So before Jesus, what happened to people who, you know, lived during the times of Abraham or Noah and so forth? Okay. So here is how the Bible describes this. There was a place called Sheol. It's called Abraham's bosom. All right. And so in Abraham's bosom, there was 2 areas. At the bottom, that's where wicked people were. And it was like a hell. In the top of it, there was where the saints would be, like Abraham, David, and all that. They weren't in heaven. They weren't in hell. It's called Abraham's bosom. That is where everybody went pre the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. When Jesus died and he descended into Sheol, we say into hell, into Abraham's bosom. That is where Jesus proclaimed the gospel to those who were held in captivity. And the Bible tells us that he led the captives free. And when Jesus resurrected, the Bible also says there was a lot of other people that resurrected with Jesus, and they walked the streets of Jerusalem. That was the saints of old. And when Jesus ascended up to heaven, he ascended on a cloud. That cloud is called the great cloud of witnesses. Those are the saints of old that went up to heaven with Jesus. And so before Jesus, there was like a holding place called Abraham's bosom. And Jesus tells a parable about how the rich man and Lazarus was the poor guy. He went to Abraham's bosom to the top part. The rich guy went down to the bad part. And so that's how the Bible describes it.
Interesting. Yeah, I've always been curious about that. Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, so you're saying that as long as you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, everything's good. I mean,
you're going to heaven. If you do not,
I did do that.
You'll spend eternity apart from God, because here's the deal. Everybody will be judged by God. Everybody, all of us are going to be judged by God. And here's the bad news. we're all in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
All of us are
I
in a
was gonna
lot of
say,
trouble.
a lot of bad things.
Yeah, like good people go to heaven and bad people go to hell. No, I'm so glad that's not true, because if that was true, there'd be nobody in heaven.
Yeah, because everyone's bad. Everyone
all
has their
bad.
own
We're all
weirdness
bad.
or thing about them that's just like
That's
corrupt.
the good news of the gospel, is that Jesus Christ took our punishment upon himself. And if you receive him and what he has done, you're not guilty. You are covered in his blood. Your blood is not shed. His blood was shed for you. So that's the good news of the gospel, is that it's not based on what I do. I cannot earn my way to heaven. However, the finished work of Jesus Christ, when I put my faith in him, I am now born again. I'm a new creature. I am going to spend eternity with God. That's the good news of the gospel.
So
Grace.
why did Jesus need to be crucified? Okay, I know these are probably elementary questions, but I know
No,
I'm
they're
being
good.
mindful of your time. Before that, they were sacrificing animals, correct?
Yes.
So did God had to send Jesus Christ to be sacrificed as a lamb, as an animal,
Yes.
in order to fulfill what?
Well, in the book of Genesis, God told Adam and Eve that the punishment for sin, God set the punishment for sin, death. He said, if you eat of that tree, you will die. Death is the punishment for sin. The Bible tells us that life is in blood. So without the shedding of blood, there can be no forgiveness of sin. So God set the punishment for sin. But here's the great news. God then paid the price for the very punishment that he set. And so his blood was shed to pay the price of what we did. That's the good news of the gospel. So why did Jesus have to be crucified, buried, and resurrected? Because if he didn't die in our place, you and I have to take that death upon ourselves, because we've all sinned.
And we'd go to Abraham's bosom is where we would go.
And then we would stand before God at the very end. And if we were not washed in the blood of Jesus, then we would spend eternity apart from God in a place that the Bible describes as hell.
So I just had 𝗬𝗓 on, who's also Christian, by the way, but he we were talking about the red heifer that allegedly just got sacrificed. I don't know if it was a mock sacrifice or what it was, but have you heard about this?
Oh yeah,
the red heifer.
Yeah, it's.
Can you give me shed some light on this? I mean, is it legit?
Well, I don't know if the actual sacrifices. There's so many reports that come out that they did, they didn't. So I don't want to speak to whether they did or they did not. But here's what I can speak to. It is absolutely necessary for those red heifers to be sacrificed so that there can be priests to work the temple. So you can't rebuild the temple unless you have somebody to work in the temple. But you can't have somebody to work in the temple until they have been cleansed. And part of the cleansing process that it was described back in the Old Testament is the red heifers. And so,
but if you believe in Jesus, you don't need any of this.
Right. Well, this is for Jews.
Right,
this is
right. Okay.
Jews who do not believe in Jesus.
Okay.
They want to rebuild a third temple, and they want to resume the sacrifices that you read about in the Old Testament. Now, as New Testament believers, we understand Jesus fulfilled all those sacrifices. I don't need a third temple. I don't need a red heifer. I don't need any of that. But the Bible does say at the end, one of the signs of the end times is that there will be a third temple. There's not one right now. So in order for the end to come, there's got to be a third temple, because that is where the Antichrist will set himself up and declare himself as God. So you have to have a third temple.
Right. So they're expecting their Messiah to come.
Yes.
To us will be the Antichrist.
Yes, they're looking for we believe the Messiah already came, and he's coming back again. His name is Jesus. But unbelieving Jews, they're still looking for the Christ to come. And so they're going to build a third temple. The only way they can build that third temple, though, they first have to sacrifice the red heifers. That's why it's so important in times. Those red heifers are a sign of the end times, because when those are sacrificed, now they can have priests to work inside the temple. And here's the thing you got to realize. The temple, those stones, they're already cut. They're already ready to go. Israel says they can build the temple in 72 hours. It is like Legos.
In 72 hours?
72 hours.
So
do you think there's any 72 hours?
Do you think there's any coincidence with the red heifers being sacrificed and this alien mothership coming through. Have you seen this? The alien?
I've seen the reports. I don't really know
Do
anything
you think
about it.
this all coincides together? Like
Probably world affairs. You're going to have so much changing all at once, and people are going to be so shaky. There's got to be some reason that everyone's going to turn their power over to the Antichrist. There's going to have to be something that takes place. I don't know what that is, but there will have to be something.
Wow. All right. Well, let's get any more questions in here. Any other questions? All right. So Bonnie Blackwood 4427. How can we be complacent with 402 acres in Plano, Texas, is designated as a Sharia enclave? We know this isn't a simulation, but a push toward eliminating American way of life. Dearborn and Minneapolis. Yeah, this is. I had a lieutenant on talking about this, Douglas Deaton, talking about everything that's going on in Plano. Absolutely. I'm curious how this is going to get resolved. I don't know.
I don't know. It's a mess, but it has to be addressed because this cannot be allowed in our country. This is the United States of America. Sharia law is incompatible with the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and our way of life. It doesn't do this. It does this right here.
And plus, they're even pushing the Church of Satanism, man. Literally.
What a time to be alive, man. Yes. We got Satanism, Islam, aliens. What a time. What a time.
It's the green light. All right. Any other questions? Let's see. Is that it, Alex? I guess that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it for the questions today.
All right. Well, folks, Jackson and his book. Show the book one more time. You show it, and then Alex will show it.
We got it on too.
Lahmeyer, Chasing After the Wind. Where do people get this?
So they can go to my website, 𝗀𝗃𝗠𝗠𝗀𝗠𝗀𝗃. If they buy it on there, they'll get a signed edition. I'll sign it, send it to them. If they go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, it's not signed. So I don't know if my signature increases or decreases the value, but if they want it signed, 𝗀𝗃𝗠𝗠𝗀𝗃.
Well, I'm going to say it increases at 𝗀𝗃𝗠𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀com. I'll put the link down there below once this video is done. And, man, I appreciate you coming on. I'd love to have you on again.
Oh, absolutely.
For some updates, of what's going on. I know it was a last-second thing, but it is what it is. Yeah, I was going to do this pre-recorded, and I was like, let's go live. Why not?
I love it. And, hey, I'll send you a book. You tell me what you think.
Yeah, please do. So
absolutely.
I will give the publicist my address, I guess, and get
perfect.
It to you. All right, cool. All right, folks, we're out of here. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Jackson, for joining me.
Thank you, sir.